Okay, welcome to my latest experiment on the Koala Starry Holographic Vinyl sticker paper. That's a mouthful. Alright, what we're doing here on this very busy attention-getting surface is doing some whiting out, and I'm using the Brilliance white pigment ink. It's a fast-drying water-based pigment ink. I haven't tried the oil-based white pigment inks on here, but I'm suspecting they'll work, but I have yet to try that. Now, what I'm doing is I'm blocking off a lot of area that's going to represent kind of a snowy landscape in addition to the snowy covered bridge, okay? So I'll get my bearings after I stamp out that initial snowy covered bridge. So a lot of times people ask me, where do you start with a scene? How do you know what stamps to start with? They might know what stamps to use, but they don't know what ones to start off with. A lot of times it's your main image, so if it's a cabin or something like that, you want that to be kind of the focal point. If it's a waterfall, something like that, it's not always the largest stamp, but it's usually one of the larger ones, and it's usually one of the more kind of attention-getting ones rather than just like a tree or something of that sort. Okay, so here's my snowy covered bridge, and I'm going to use the VersaFine Clair oil-based pigment ink, okay? Now, I did stamp it directly onto the papers in a test, and it worked just fine. But it will definitely work fine on the white Brilliance. Okay, now I'm getting my bearings as far as where I want those tree trunks to go, so I wanted to stamp that snowy covered bridge first. And what I'm doing is I'm whiting out the area that I'm going to stamp out these tree trunks. Now you notice I'm not, doing some kind of outline or something where it's going to be the exact area that I'm going to stamp out these trees on. And it's because it doesn't have to be that close, okay? I want to get a pretty good, I don't want to be off by an inch or something like that, but if I'm off by a quarter inch or something like that, that's fine. Alright, so we have our areas in there, and I'm going to stamp out this trunk. But when I thought about it, I thought, I'm going to wipe off some of the bottom so it stamps out lighter because I plan on using some fences in the foreground. Plus, I think it looks cool for that trunk to go down into what might represent kind of a low-lying mist, that's hovering, off the ground. So I did the same thing on the other side. Wipe off the bottom of the stamp, but don't take off so much ink that it's removing all of it, okay? You want just to be a transition into kind of a black down into a gray. Okay, I cut off about a ½ inch off the top of this. It was a little bit too big for those tree trunks, and I don't want those tree trunks to go any higher up there, okay? Alright, so now I need to fill in around these tree trunks and the snowy covered bridge with some additional texture. This is the snow texture stamp. And I'm just stamping it in black. Alright, so again, it doesn't have to merge everything super seamlessly because of the other techniques that we're going to use right over the top of it. Alright, fences from Nature Set number 26. Here I'm using the left side large fence. And here comes the right side, going in from that side. And you notice I have a little bit of space there on the complete right-hand side, so I'm going to apply some ink to that last grouping of that fence, whatever, rungs or post. I'm going to stamp it in here to extend that fence out like that. Okay, here comes the spooky branch. We need to add something up in that sky just to break up that super busy skyline up there. And also to create a little bit of a vignette in the left and right corners of this card. Okay, it kind of frames things off a little bit. So this is the spooky branch. So I plan on layering some imagery. Okay, Tiny Rock Small, down on that lower section, extending the snowy covered bridge image, road, down below. Okay, so here's the leaves. I'm trying it in a white ink. My idea was to stamp black, then white, then black over the top of these. So it's supposed to represent some just icy kind of branches or leaves. I know that that's a deciduous tree and it wouldn't have any leaves, but you know, you take artistic license when you're doing artwork and scenes to serve your purpose. And I needed something a little bit heavier to go in those upper left and right corners like that. So I use the leaves. All right, now I'm trying the Tiny Rock Small in white. You really couldn't see it, so I didn't add on any more of that. Now I'm going to try to layer my reeds down here in a white. So I went with a black, reeds large. Going with a white one after that to give it kind of an icy look, and then going with black right over the top of that to sandwich that white layer in between there. It just gives it a little bit more depth than just going with one layer. One layer looks fine though, but I don't know, experiment around and see what you like. Okay, this is the 3mm acrylic paint pen. I'm going in and adding some highlights. Inevitably, using this acrylic pen, it's going to give me a whiter look than just the white pigment ink, which looks a little bit more translucent in some areas. It went down a little bit thicker in some areas, but you know, by and large, it's kind of translucent. You can see through it. So I'm just going and adding in some highlights using this pen here. It's really fun in terms of adding a new textural element into there. It can look a little bit strange if you just add it in one area, but if you add it in multiple areas, it becomes more of a universal texture, in this case representing kind of a stronger light reflecting off of the surface in those areas. A little bit more refinement going in with the 7.7mm acrylic pen, adding some highlights on these fences. It gives it more of a kind of a three-dimensional look when you add a highlight on, you know, your various objects. And that these inks are really sticking really well to this sticker paper. Sometimes when I'm going over like a thicker pigment ink, like this VersaFine Clear, it kind of digs, you know, the pen, this 0.7mm kind of digs into it and clogs the pen, but I don't know, it's sticking so well to this one. All right, now here's the big thing that I really like about this surface, this holographic or printer type of surface, is the inks really grab that whatever coating's on there, emulsion, I'm not quite sure what, but that white pigment ink that I've laid down, the Brilliance, is really stuck on the card, and it gives it this kind of matte-like white surface that I can really layer my colored pencils on. Unbelievably so. I thought it would be too smooth, or going on with the colored pencils that would dig into the white, but no such thing. It works like a maybe like a satin, you know, like a semi-gloss paper. You know, it doesn't go on as good as if we're using like a textured paper, you know, designed perfectly for colored pencils, but it's not too bad. Okay, adding in some layered brown tones into the trees, into the covered bridge. And I use multiple tones of brown, kind of multiple values rather. And I'm kind of making the outside areas of both trunks a little bit darker so that it looks like the scene is a little bit more interior lit. Okay, so I don't see these trunks as being universally colored. I'll color the whole thing with a light brown, but the darker browns I'm kind of doing on one side, and then I'll follow suit with a black colored pencil too. Going in a little bit more, so I'm layering my colored pencils. Okay, adding a little bit of that snow to the tree. And here comes the black colored pencil. I couldn't get super dark with this colored pencil because, you know, this paper is only going to take so many layers, but it's not too bad. You can get a pretty good application in there with this, I don't know, media surface combination. Okay. See that? Adding a little bit more shadows. It looks like the scene is kind of interior lit now by adding the shadows on the opposite sides of the tree trunk, depending on what side they're on. Okay, now see, that background is still a little bit busy for me, so I'm getting even busier, usually, with this white Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white in a splatter painting context, but unbelievably so, splatter painting white over the top of, you know, super holographic, you know, printer paper like that actually kind of subdues it a little bit more because the white is just kind of like a neutral matte white. All right, so sandwiching my layers of imagery in here with a little bit of white pigment ink in the form of some mist. So we've laid that down first to stamp our images on top of, and I'm finishing off by adding a little bit over the top of some of these images, so it's like kind of they're enveloped in mist. It's kind of going full suit. You start off with this and you end up with it. Okay, I was looking at this again. Look at that glittery surface though, isn't that crazy? Matted it down, adding in some larger dots using the 0.7 millimeter acrylic paint pen. Just for some variation, you know, those little dots don't stand up too well against that super busy background, so you just draw on some larger dots for a little bit more variation. And I'm just showing people that, you know, that pencil right there won't work on the, just directly on that paper, but it works on this white pigment ink that's been applied just fine, and I think that's going to be my killer application of this paper. It's using it in conjunction with colored pencils. Okay, so that's the scene. Hope you enjoyed it, and I really encourage you guys to give this type of paper a test or a try, and I think you'll like it. Okay, thanks so much for watching.